On the morning of June the 17th, 1934, a train pulled into the Kansas City carrying the most successful bank robber in American history. But within about 30 seconds of stepping outside, he was dead, and four of the lawmen guarding him died right along with him. History calls it the Kansas City Massacre, also known as the Union Station Massacre, depending on who you ask. And the official story pinned it all on three gangsters with machine guns, a story that went on to build the modern FBI. But when those five bodies reached the examination table, the man in charge of them wrote down exactly what he saw, and it would take 60 years before anybody argued that his paperwork was telling a different story, that some of those bullets in those bodies may have come out of the wrong guns. Well, I'm Mr. V, and welcome back to the Hidden Lens, and today we're following those bodies from a bloody parking lot all the way to a desk or a table that nobody ever talks about. So let's talk about the guy in the front seat of that car first, though. His name was Frank Nash. He had been robbing banks since before World War I. He was so good at it that historians credit him with somewhere around 200 bank jobs. He picked up a life sentence for murder back in 1913, and then he talked his way into a pardon. Then he caught a 25 years sentence for burglary with explosives, and wouldn't you know it, he got pardoned again, which tells you plenty about how the justice system worked in Oklahoma when you had friends in the underworld. By 1924, though, he was sitting in Leavenworth on a federal sentence, and in October of 1930, he skedaddled. He escaped, and he stayed gone. The government hunted this man for almost 3 years before they finally caught him again on June the 16th, 1933, in a cigar store down in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Now, here's a detail that matters later, so hang on to it. The agents who grabbed Nash, had no legal authority in 1933 to grab him. They couldn't make arrests, and they couldn't even carry firearms. But plenty of them carried firearms anyway, because the law hadn't caught up to what the job duties were, which required having firearms. And that's why they brought along a police chief named Otto Reed from McAlester, Oklahoma. They needed the authority. Reed was carrying a shotgun that morning, and an agent named Joe Lackey ended up holding one too. Those two shotguns, keep them in mind. Keep those in mind, because this whole story eventually focuses on them. Now, the lawmen put Nash on a night train out of Fort Smith, and the word of his capture moved faster than the train. A crooked detective back in Hot Springs tipped off of one of Nash's associates, and just after midnight, the Kansas City Star ran a wire story spelling out that the federal agents are bringing this guy through by rail. And so a man named Verne Miller started organizing a welcome party. Miller had actually been a sheriff up in South Dakota before he switched teams to the other side, and the FBI would later claim he recruited Pretty Boy Floyd and Adam Ricchetti the night before. No, Floyd, for his part, denied being there until the day he died, and that denial is part of where their story is going to be headed to. And here's something you got to understand about the city itself. Kansas City in 1933 was not just another stop on the map. This was Tom's town. The whole place ran politically through boss Tom Pendergrass and his machine, and an organized crime boss named John Lazia. He had his fingers in everything from the police department on down. Multiple sources point to Lazia as the man who coordinated the tip-off that put a welcome party at Union Station that morning. Whether or not that part is true, well, the atmosphere in that city is what made things like this possible, though. So the train rolls into Union Station at 9:15 in the morning. There's 7 lawmen walking Nash through the lobby in handcuffs, and they take him out the east doors. There's a Chevrolet parked right up front to take care of them and transport them. Nash gets loaded into the front seat while Lackey, Smith, and Reed climb into the back seat. And Agent Caffrey is walking around to the driver's door when someone over by a green Plymouth yells to let them have it. And the whole parking lot just lights up. It just comes apart. The whole thing lasted about 30 seconds. Both the Kansas City detectives standing outside the car died right where they stood. Caffrey took a projectile through his noggin and was pronounced dead at the General Hospital before breakfast was even over. Inside the car, Reed was gone, and Nash was slumped behind the wheel with his head torn open. This is the man the whole operation out there is supposed to rescue, damn it. The gunmen, well, they ran up, looked at the people inside the car, decided everybody in there was finished, and they just decided to drive off. Now, as it happened, they were kind of wrong about that. Lackey survived with 3 bullets in his back, and Agent Smith somehow come through the whole thing without a scratch. This is where the scene turns into a circus. The onlookers were on top of those bodies within seconds. Now, this was 1933, so crime scene tape didn't exist yet, and nobody was sending out a forensics team, so the whole protection plan amounted to cops yelling at people to step back. Well, that didn't work. The bystanders, like vultures, they walked off with evidence and souvenirs, and the press photographers, they were all up in that stuff. They were shooting the dead men right where they lay between the damn cars. The pictures ran in the newspaper all over the country before the blood had even dried. So the most important crime scene of the decade got picked apart by dumbasses, and that's a big part of why the FBI's eventual case ended up resting on fingerprints pulled off a beer bottle in a basement. Not on anything recovered from the scene, because those people wouldn't bring it back. Now we get to the man whose job it was to make sense of all this wreckage. Every violent death in that county crossed exactly one desk, and that desk belonged to the Jackson County Coroner. His office took custody of 5 shot-up bodies, all that came out of the same half minute of gunfire. It was a summer morning, and the entire country was watching. History didn't preserve any personal account from this man, so I can't sit here and tell you what he said when the wagon started arriving, but I can tell you what he did. The job that was in front of him, he did it very well. He documented the wounds the way coroners do, and the case just moved on around him. Nobody at the time read anything unusual into that paperwork, and the meaning of what got written down that summer would sit quietly in the case records for decades. The official story was set by lunchtime. It said 3 gangsters carrying 45 caliber machine guns had slaughtered 4 lawmen in cold blood, and J. Edgar Hoover ran hard with that version because the massacre became his argument for turning the FBI into an armed national police force. And for roughly 60 years, that version stood mostly unchallenged. Now, go ahead and hype up this video and give it a thumbs up. When I tell you what a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter found buried in the FBI's own files. The reporter's name is Robert Unger, and he spent years digging through the Bureau's own records on this case. His conclusion was really brutal. He argues the lawmen did most of the shooting and the killing that morning. In his reconstruction, Lackey was sitting in the back seat gripping a pump shotgun he had never handled before, and when the attack started, he fired it inside the car because that's where he was sitting. When you ain't got time to get out to go shoot somebody, you got to shoot them where you're sitting, right? Well, Unger believes that blast took off the back of Frank Nash's head and sent lead flying forward towards the men standing outside. And he's right. The attackers didn't kill Nash at all. His own escorts did. That's if he's right. Then you have Agent Caffrey. Decades after that morning, his own son said publicly that his father was apparently killed by friendly fire, meaning a ball fired from a shotgun rather than a .45. And that son had grown up to become a pathologist, so he knew exactly what he was looking at when he read the evidence. And here's how that's even possible. When the shooting started, Caffrey hadn't even gotten into the car yet. He had unlocked the door and was coming around the outside towards the driver's seat, out in the open, on foot. His son's argument comes down to the wound itself, because the thing that killed his father was a ball fired from a shotgun, not a round from a machine gun. And as far as we know, the only shotguns anywhere near that parking lot were the 2 the lawmen had brought with them. Remember, the lawmen were the ones who carried shotguns into that parking lot, while witnesses put a machine gun in at least one attacker's hands. Nobody could say with total certainty that everything the gunmen were holding that morning, what they were, and that uncertainty is exactly why this argument has never been settled. Now, I need to be square with you about this part. Unger's theory is disputed. The Bureau never accepted it. for, whatever obvious reasons they had not to accept it. And some historians push back on it even now because usually it requires that there be no gray area to be able to 100% change a story, even if the official story isn't 100%. Now, the ballistic analysts behind the friendly fire argument come from research done along the fact. Or done after the fact. There we go. So what you're hearing is an interpretation of the evidence rather than a settled verdict. But I can tell you this much. Caffrey's own son, his own family, accepts that the friendly fire explanation to this day. If this one stuck with you, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. And I'm Mr. B, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Hidden Lens.